Hey, everybody, it's David Bishop, partner at Brick Meets Click, and I'm here to talk about what the heck is going on with eGrocery in November.
November was supposed to be a stress test for lower income households online. There were delayed and partial SNAP payments, rising costs, and a lot of concerns about pullback. But the top line numbers stayed strong, and we even saw AOVs climb. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on here?
That's a great question, and there is a lot going on. And you are correct. We did have delay in SNAP payments across several states, and that has actually impacted some of the spending that we did see in the month of November. If we looked at the share of online spend by income segment, we saw the lowest income segment, that being households making under 50,000, actually pulling back its share of spending that went online by a little over 1.5 percentage points, while at the same time, all other income segments were showing just the opposite trend, growing by at least 2 percentage points year over year. So clearly, a contraction within that lower income segment where SNAP households resides. A lot of other factors could be playing into that. But again, when you're trying to stretch a buck and the buck diminishes, well, you only have so many options left. Going forward in 26, a lot depends on how the SNAP payments change based on the big, beautiful bill that was signed earlier this year by the current administration. There could be significant pullback in the amounts of money that are given through those benefit programs. And subsequently, that's going to only put further pressure on top of those households, which is important to remember, especially when you consider that groceries as a share of post-tax income for the lowest income households, that is under 50,000, according to our definition, is almost 4 times higher as a share compared to those over 200,000. Let me just give you the percentage because that may be a little hard to understand. Households making under $50,000 a year spend on average about 24% of their after-tax dollars on grocery-related items. So that's food at home, pet supplies, housekeeping supplies, things of that sort. That over $200,000 household is only spending about 6.5%. So we have a very significant delta between those two. And that's important also when you realize that inflationary pressures have actually really increased this year, right? The average based on our tracking of the grocery related categories is now averaging around 2.3. It's actually higher than probably 2.6 today, but averaging 2.3 over the last 3 or 4 months compared to about a 1.3% year over year comparison for 24. So the dollar isn't going as far, and now we have fewer dollars. So the natural conclusion of seeing grocery spending contract slightly for that lower income segment with that context makes a lot of sense.
Delivery bounced back in November and grabbed a bigger share of online sales again, but pickup also hit a record high. Earlier this year, we worried that if delivery kept increasing, it would come straight out of pickup. You've said before, when pickup loses, grocers lose because it's the most affordable fulfillment method for them. Can you give us your thoughts?
It is true that I did say that when pickup loses, grocers lose. And primarily that was because from a method standpoint, again, looking only at delivery and pickup in this case, pickup is the more defensible method from a grocer's perspective. And the primary reason for that is due to the store's proximity to the end consumer. That has been the advantage that the grocers enjoyed in the physical world of retailing versus the large mass retailers like Walmart. However, in the online world of retailing, delivery has disintermediated that advantage by bringing the store to the house. But now pickup's also threatened not just by delivery, but by ship to home. And that's due to the innovative new service that Amazon has rolled out through its same day grocery, fresh grocery, that's supported through its ship to home fulfillment methods. Now, it's important to keep in mind that when we look at pickup within the grocery space, that is supermarkets in particular, pickup still offers the lower cost option for the consumer simply because there is no gratuity. Generally, we have a lower fee. Now, this doesn't apply to mass because mass has free pickup. So, one of the things we're also seeing today is mass, and Walmart in particular, is not simply growing delivery. They're growing across each of their segments, and pickup is quite healthy for them. So, part of the results that we're seeing is a transfer of demand into pickup from grocery into mass as people have this flight to value for lower prices due to all the inflationary pressures that we talked about relative to the first question. As we look at pickup, what we also need to think about is how can we innovate and enhance this experience further to attract more demand that may not have been driven by that. Today, all the innovation is resting in delivery and now more recently in ship to home. However, in 26, we would expect retailers like Walmart to revisit their pickup strategy and to accelerate cycle times. So as regional grocers look at how they're positioned versus someone like Walmart, they need to be thinking about their express services as an example of providing a value-added service to that customer who is time stretched. And primarily what I'm referring to is that pickup on the way home. This is where we've seen retailers like Target really win by saving time and saving aggravation for that time-starved working parent who is picking up a load of groceries on their way home from work. So as grocers look at this, they need to think about how they can, in some ways, emulate that approach while also focusing on reducing the cycle times between the time the order is placed and the time in which it can be distributed to the customer's vehicle in the transport.
Likelihood to reuse a service slipped in November for pickup and delivery, but also for supermarkets overall. On the surface, that sounds like a warning sign, but a lot of this month's growth came from new online customers, and you've said before it takes 2.5 to 3.5 new customers to replace one that leaves. What can you tell us about this?
Yes, it is true that we did see a slight decline in the likelihood to reuse the same service within the next 30 days. That is not uncommon, especially when we see strong monthly active user growth. Not in this case at the top line level, but within the segment levels. We did see a huge push of new to online users trying services for the very first time. What we saw was that those first time users of a specific service were the ones who were primarily dragging down the top line likely to use again metric. That's not uncommon, but it dropped significantly more than what we've seen in the past. And only one of the other segments had a decline, which was the third time user. I think what's important is that the most established customer using an existing service that we measure is the 4 or more frequency, which is they've used the service 4 or more times within the last 3 months. And we've continued to see the size of this user segment grow almost at a rate of about 5 percentage points year over year for over the last 2 years. So we now have almost 60% of the active users of a delivery or pickup service falling in this camp. So what does that mean? Well, we need to constantly bring in and attract new users to try our service because that's going to fuel growth through AOV and order frequency growth as they mature and become more familiar and accustomed and trust our ability to deliver a service. But what we also can't lose sight of is really making sure we nurture and protect those established customers. Those customers spend 50% more on average per order versus the first timer, and they spend considerably more versus all of the others as they're moving up that ladder. So while the likelihood to use again did pull back slightly, was primarily due to an influx of a lot of new customers trying services And by the way, they may have been trying services through special or promotional offers, which on the face of it would also push churn rates up higher, just given the nature of who those customers are that are being attracted by those offers.
Monthly active users were up again in November, and over the year, we've seen strong growth among older shoppers, higher income households, and people using multiple methods. Some of that is clearly tied to holiday shopping, but how much of this new or reactivated shopper spike is seasonal, and how much reflects a lasting change in how people use eGrocery?
We did have modest single-digit growth in the overall eGrocery base. It grew 4% year over year. If we were to go beneath that level, we saw surging gains for each of the methods, but almost all of the growth in monthly active users on the top line was driven by new users coming in and using online for the first time, as hard as that is to believe. In fact, as of November of this year, we now have a customer pool who has ever shopped online cresting 80%, almost 81% for the first time. And that's up 2 points from a year ago, which had been flat since 23. That acceleration or reacceleration of the growth, where we're now seeing about a 2.5% year over year growth in the total customer pool, comes at a time when before August, our total customer pool was gradually slowing at a rate 0.5, 0.4% year over year. So nearly all of it's due to structural changes in the market as opposed to the seasonal. And those structural changes really are in two of the three methods. One is in delivery and the continued growth and strength that's only strengthening in membership and subscriptions. And the second is in ship to home related to Amazon's new same day fresh grocery service. So we see this as being very sticky directionally. And we can say that if we point to the continued sustained growth in monthly active user expansion, either at the top line or within the segments, as well as from the continued growth in the average order frequencies that for the 15th consecutive month have been growing year over year. And that's still coming after a year of 24 that was also recording positive order frequency growth. So for those reasons, we see most of the influx of new users being driven more by the structural changes than by these seasonal fluctuations.
Looking back, what's the one trend that truly defined eGrocery in 2025? And looking ahead, are there any emerging signals from November that could shape 2026?
All right. Well, looking back, I would say the one trend would be the sustained and continued strength in the growth of delivery, driven primarily by membership and subscription programs. Just as a data point, for someone like Walmart, over 80% of all of their online orders for delivery, we estimate now are linked to their Walmart Plus membership. If we were to include all three segments, that number would probably be just under 70%. So it indicates or signifies the value and the importance of the membership program in driving demand. And it's driving demand in a way that has rebalanced the trade-off between cost and convenience. And it's done that in a very effective way that we've now seen matched and imitated by regionals that continue to follow a similar playbook of deep discounting the annual membership as a way to attract those existing customers to lock in and then to encourage them to take the most advantage of the benefits associated with the respective programs. In terms of looking forward, I would then actually point to ship to home, because we were really surprised by the developments that we saw in the second half of this year, which were again driven by Amazon's expansion of their same day fresh grocery, which we have seen reverse the flat trend that we have been on. And I think also keeping in mind that ship to home from pre-pandemic to today has gone through somewhat of a trough, and they hit the lows in the 2022 period and then have been relatively flat through most of 25, but have resurged in terms of growth and demand in the second half that we attribute, based on our reading of the numbers, to that expansion of Amazon's new service. I think as we go forward, that service, even though we classify as ship to home, feels very much like delivery to the customer, means that we now have a new calculation for the customer, because the Amazon Fresh same day grocery service doesn't require a tip, and its delivery fee is zero if you exceed its threshold of $25, which isn't very hard. So it's going to make competition for the delivery customer even more intense. Even though we consider this ship to home, the customer is going to view this as delivery. So it just is going to require grocers to sharpen their pencils to determine how are they going to innovate in ways to enhance the experience, to attract more demand to their business that they can sustain going forward.
As we wrap up, I've got a bonus question for you, David. How has eGrocery changed during these 5+ years of consecutive reports? What stands out most about the industry's evolution?
Good question. I actually think it's closer to 6 years, but who's counting, right? If I went back to March of 2020 or even August 2019 when we were doing this, ship to home was the dominant method. It had over 40% of the business. Pickup was in second place around 30, 32, and delivery picked up the rear. Today, it's flipped. Delivery's over 40%. Pickup's still second, just right behind delivery. And ship to home now is a distant third with under 20%. But again, as we said, ship to home is going through a new S-curve of growth with this same day fresh grocery service that is clearly going to reinflate its share and likely take share from the pickup segment, just given the convenience and cost aspects that this new service provides compared to pickup. But I think the other is just how the business has evolved. Walmart, from around 21 on, we don't have all the way back to 2020 at this point, at least in my mind, has grown nearly 7 points of market share. So where they were sitting at maybe 26, 27% 5 years ago, they're now cresting 36% of the overall e-grocery market, which is again encompassing all three of those methods: delivery, pickup, and ship to home. But it's worth pointing out that they didn't do that by having everything built and established up front. They've had pickup fully built out for about 2 or 3 years, but delivery just reached full distribution, effective full distribution in terms of its reach of its first party service. But what's really been interesting to watch is the evolution of the offers and the value proposition, and how, again, we've seen this reconciliation between the trade-off that has historically been between cost and convenience. And it's getting to a point where shopping online really doesn't need to cost more than shopping in the store. And as a result, it's removing all the barriers to the demand to improve that shopping. I know firsthand, I'm placing orders at 10 o'clock at night. And this week I received my order at 6:30 in the morning, so that the first thing I could do was put away my groceries, saving me an hour and a half of going to and from and shopping the store. It's no longer simply convenient for me. It's becoming an essential part of my shopping behavior. Now, it's not replacing the trips to the store. When we want our nice steak and our produce, we're going to our local regional grocer for that. But those staple pantry items, packaged goods that we regularly use, and especially those national branded items, we're putting in the cart, putting it online, and sending it for delivery. Not necessarily express, but when we want it. So we now have the ability to get a delivery at 6 in the morning, or we have the ability to order online and get our groceries within 30 or 60 minutes. And we have seen this shift toward that expedited delivery service where a significant portion now is being fulfilled within 3 hours. And that is really amazing, but I think it's possible primarily because of the change in the value proposition that has reduced the cost to serve on a per order basis while increasing the convenience aspects of being able to get the products you want when you want. So I think just seeing the evolution of the value proposition in general relative to shopping online, the adoption and the embrace of that, we can see that it is slowly but surely shifting the way people shop and think of the way they shop. So as we go forward, whether we're talking about unified commerce, e-commerce, omni-channel, clearly there are so many aspects of the shopping experience that we need to think about. Well, I mean, there's the leading indicators, which would be, it's not simply trial of these new services. We have to remember today we're still at the early stages of many of these new services. And as these new services come out, there are generally promotional deals to kind of spiff it, right? So we see the willingness to pay as a strong early indicator. And right now on the express side, we're sitting at over 50% of those orders being paid orders. In other words, they're not coming through promotional offers. We have seen a slight pullback in the last few months in the share that has gone through less than 3 hours, but that may be more of a transitory effect related to some of the cash tightening that we've been going through. But clearly, consumers are reevaluating the value of their time versus the value of performing the shopping activities themselves. And I think the clearest indication of that is in the growth of the fresh products within the basket, because we've known historically that along with explicit cost is a top reason why people would refrain from buying online certain products. And we're not seeing that as visible today as we did 5 years ago.
Thanks for listening. If you found these insights helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more conversations on the future of grocery. Have a question you'd like answered? Email us at solutions@mercatus.com.